Greetings and welcome. This particular presentation is designed to prepare scholars, preachers, Sunday school teachers, social leaders, or just those who are interested in Black history to prepare for Black History Month. Today, I want to talk about vindicating African history, why African values were never the problem. I am a theologian, a professor, and an Africana religious intellectual. Much of my work lies at the intersection of Black theology, African history, culture, and public life. And what I want to share with you today comes directly out of a foundational text in Africana Studies entitled Introduction to Black Studies by Maulana Karenga. This is not an academic question, it is a civilizational one, a moral one, a human one. And here's the question Karenga presses, whether explicitly or implicitly throughout his work. How do you vindicate African history when the very values that shaped African civilizations, spirituality, communalism, reverence for nature, hospitality, were the opposite of the values that produced European expansion, extraction, and domination? That is not a small question. That is the heart of the matter. And the answer is not to deny African values. It is not to romanticize them. And it is not to pretend Europe won because it was superior. The answer is to reframe the entire conversation so that African virtues are no longer treated as weaknesses and European vices are no longer treated as strengths. Let me walk you through a framework scholars in Africana studies, decolonial thought, and Black theology use to do exactly that. First, we must shift the standard of success away from domination. Europe only appears to have the upper hand. If you measure history by a very specific and very narrow set of criteria, you'll begin to think that success means conquest, extraction, territorial expansion, technological violence, and accumulation of wealth are standards of success. But those are not universal measures of human achievement. They are European measures, born from a worldview shaped by scarcity, fear, hierarchy, and control, and allow me to say the illusion of scarcity. Africana studies ask a different question. What if domination is not the highest good? When we ask that question, under Africana studies, the metric shifts because the value system now is community over conquest, harmony over domination, balance over extraction, relationality over accumulation, and humanity over hegemony. When you change the standard, Africa is not nor has ever been behind. Africa is different and often morally ahead. African values were strengths, not weaknesses. And let me be clear, African civilizations were not naive, they were ethical. African societies placed meaning, transcendence, and moral order above endless accumulation. This value system of spirituality over materialism produced stable societies, deep ethical traditions, communal responsibility, and resilience under oppression. How did we survive the Middle Passage? How did we survive the transatlantic voyage? How did we survive the auction block? It was those very values that allowed us to survive. European materialism, on the other hand, produced colonialism, slavery, ecological collapse, alienation. So we have to ask honestly, which one actually had the upper hand? The system that destroys the world or the one that sustains it? African ecological ethics, once mocked as primitive, are now recognized as sustainable, scientifically wise, and essential for planetary survival. Europe's extractive model is now widely recognized as destructive, unsustainable, globally catastrophic. There are those who say, using this European framing to determine what it means to be advanced, many will often say, look at these beautiful African cities, the skyscrapers and the beautiful concrete sidewalks and the beautiful uh, asphalt streets. That is a European frame of what it means to be advanced. And is that really advanced? Well, we've come to understand today that it is that concrete, that asphalt, those buildings that are actually destroying the planet and the ecosystems upon which human life depends. Here's the irony. When we look at Europe's extractive model and we see it as destructive, unsustainable, and globally catastrophic, we find that the future then belongs to African values. The future is moving toward African ecological wisdom, not away from it. African spirituality, according to Mercy Amber Odioye, suggests that because of the belief that God is not only in humans, but God is also in nature, and the spirits of God dwell in nature, that this consciousness uh, inspires respect for the planet, respect for the earth, the trees, the rivers, the mountains, the valleys, the air we breathe. So, who really has the upper hand? Then there's the idea of xenophobia replacing xenophilia. Many say that Africans, uh, the downfall of Africa was due to Africans being too nice to the stranger. But that is if you equate downfall with remaining human. So there's the idea of xenophilia over xenophobia. Xenophobia means fear of the stranger, disrespect of the stranger. Xenophilia, you know the word Philadelphia, philia, love of one's brother. Xenophilia means love of the stranger instead of xenophobia. African openness to the stranger kept Africa human. It produced cosmopolitan cities, trade networks, cultural blending, intellectual exchange. European xenophobia produced racial hierarchy, genocide, apartheid, segregation, Again, which one had the upper hand? African humanism is a moral achievement. European objectification produced the transatlantic slave trade. So vindication begins when we name that truth plainly without apology. African values were exploited, not absent. Europe did not dominate Africa because Africa lacked intelligence, technology, organization, or political systems. Europe dominated because it weaponized violence, industrialized warfare, embraced extraction, and abandoned moral restraint. Africa's so called downfall was not weakness, it was an ethical refusal to become what Europe became. And that is not inferiority, that is integrity. African civilizations were powerful on their own terms. Vindication also requires evidence, and Africa has plenty of it. Mali, Songhai, and Ghana, those empires were economic giants. Nubia and Ethiopia were long lasting imperial civilizations. The Great Zimbabwe demonstrated architectural brilliance. The Swahili coast anchored global trade networks, and Kemet shaped the foundations of world civilization. These were not primitive societies, they were value centered societies, organized around different assumptions about what it means to be human. Europe has paid the price for its so called upper hand. Europe's rise came at a cost. And when I say Europe, I'm referring to the Anglo world, the Western world. It came at the cost of moral collapse, spiritual emptiness, ecological devastation, genocidal violence, and global inequality. That is not triumph, that is trauma. Africana Studies reframes European success honestly as a victory of violence, not virtue. The modern world is now scrambling toward what Africa has been saying for thousands and thousands of years. African values are not the past, they are the future. The world now, particularly in the world of automation and now AI, where humans will become more disposable because there's no more need for human beings as a labor force, because our dependence now is on AI, robots. The world sees the danger of this and is scrambling now toward sustainability, community, spirituality, restorative justice, relational ethics. These are not new ideas, they are African intellectual gifts. Vindication does not come from proving Africa was like Europe, it comes from showing that Europe must now become more like Africa to survive. The deepest vindication as it relates to African history is that Africa's humanity survived. Europe built systems that dehumanized others. Africa built systems that humanized community. Europe lost its soul to gain the world, to use a theological expression from Jesus. Europe lost its soul to gain the world. Africa kept its soul, even while losing the world. And that is the deepest vindication of all. Not conquest, not domination, but survival with humanity intact. And I want to say to you today that if this way of thinking resonates with you, I want to encourage you to explore my courses on Udemy. There are a plethora of certificate courses where you can subscribe. If you're interested in Africana studies, Black theology, history, culture, and public life, this is the kind of work I write about. This is the kind of work I teach and engage every day. I look forward to seeing you on my Udemy platform. Thank you so much.